These are the faces of convicted killers who city judges have allowed to leave court with light sentences. And these are just a handful of the cases our investigation uncovered. The future of convicted criminals like these hangs in the balance on sentencing day.
I've told defendants, I'm taking a chance with you.
Circuit Court Judge Stephen Platt retired after spending 17 years on the bench in Prince George's County.
You are imposing risks on people.
With each sentence,
I'm responsible for your behavior. And if you commit another crime, the victims of their crime will ask who in the judge in their right mind let you out.
In Maryland, Circuit Court judges have a set of guidelines to help them determine a sentence. For example, attempted murder could bring a sentence between 5 to 25 years. A sentence for first-degree rape could range from 10 years to life. These are just guidelines, however. Judges don't have to follow them. And we found in Baltimore City, many times they fall short.
As long as they were voluntary, we didn't care.
We reviewed 9,529 circuit court sentences spanning a 3-year period. Cases like murders, robberies, and sex crimes. We found overall, criminals caught a break in 62% of the cases.
We have some very tough on crime judges, and then we also have judges who do their best to arrive at a even-handed, fair outcome.
While this law professor may see city judges that way, there are top leaders in the state and former police commissioners who've accused those same judges of contributing to the city's crime rate.
This is an issue that I have been out there talking a lot about for more than a year, about the leniency of particularly Baltimore City judges.
They don't even fear a damn guilty verdict, because the guilty verdicts in this city are suspended all or most of the time, 60% of the time.
Politicians will usually charge judges with being soft on crime. That's an old story.
We spoke to 2 judges by phone about our numbers. Judge Shannon Avery and Michael Pearson called our analysis inaccurate as well as misleading because it doesn't take into account, quote, all of the factors in the guidelines. The judges are referring to certain plea deals that under the guidelines are seen as acceptable no matter how short the sentence is.
Why? Because the court said, that's not my sentence. My attitude was, yes it is. That is your sentence.
Because you could reject it.
Because you approved it and you could have rejected the plea.
Remember the faces of these convicted killers? They each cut a plea deal, and not one of them was sentenced to the recommended 60 years in jail for first-degree murder. For this father of 5, his 52nd birthday is hard to forget.
And to receive a phone call saying that your son was accused of doing something like that.
Brian Joyner spent his birthday that year negotiating his son's surrender to police.
And I still hear the voice in my head that day. And somebody called me and said, Brian, your son just killed somebody.
Court documents state on July 19, 2015, Brian Joyner Jr. shot Shaitique Lawrence Jr. several times after an argument turned physical.
I really, truly believe that the judge knew that there were some parts of this puzzle that just weren't there.
According to state sentencing guidelines, a sentence for first-degree murder can range between 60 years to life. In Joyner's case, he entered a plea deal. His sentence was 28 years in prison. It's more than 30 years below the recommended sentencing guidelines in Maryland. Baltimore City's administrative judge defends shorter sentences like Joyner's, saying, quote, a significant number of sentences in Baltimore City are the result of plea deals recommended by the state. But a judge still needs to approve the plea deal. And in Baltimore City, judges are signing off on plea deals with sentences far below the state guidelines, just like the judge did in Joyner's case. Judges tell us they're compliant with the guidelines 80% of the time. We reviewed more than 9,500 sentences in Baltimore City. That's as tall as this stack. We found only 34% are actually within the guidelines. The discrepancy is due in part to plea deals, similar to the one Joyner signed. Those plea deals are an exception to the rule, meaning judges can give shorter sentences and not be held accountable.
We never were sure why that those who made that decision not to count it thought it shouldn't be counted, but they weren't.
Retired Judge Stephen Platt remembers when the guidelines were first introduced.
If you went outside the guidelines, you weren't going to be reprimanded.
No. I never got a call.
Everything is not as cut and dry. I'm sorry that family lost their son. But the circumstances surrounding this case is really just not that simple.
In the eyes of Shaiteek Lawrence's family, their loved one was murdered. It is that simple, a point they're reminded of every year around their son's birthday. His death still too difficult to publicly discuss even now, 4 years later.
Come here, Belle.
Gloria Taylor has her hands full.
13,
Take me,
10,
Stop.
8,
You see it?
7, 6, 3.
A mother of 6 can be challenging.
Jake, come on.
Gloria believed motherhood had prepared her for just about everything. Little did she suspect she was about to be proven wrong.
I spent 3 weeks in jail for riding on a suspended license in the FTA
Gloria didn't have just one failure to appear or FTA, but 2 of them.
because I had moved and I didn't give the courts my new address. The second FTA that was issued, I was late, but I did show up for court.
When she surrendered on March 27th, Gloria thought she might spend a night in jail. Instead, a district court judge in Baltimore City ordered she be held without bail at Central Booking, where she remained for the next 3 weeks.
It was like being in hell on earth for me, with a family and a working woman. I spent a birthday in jail. My son had an injury. I wasn't there for him. I had a miscarriage while I was in there.
It's cases like Gloria's the Able Foundation, a local nonprofit, is attempting to track. The research follows the implementation of bail reform in the state.
What we're interested in seeing is, are judges following this rule or judges not following this rule?
It's crucial information the Maryland judiciary has found a way to hide online. Fox 45 and the Able Foundation received similar letters from the judiciary denying a public records request for information that would have shed light on the bail judges were assigning defendants.
That's concerning. If you have a court or an agency who can turn a public record into a non-public record through that kind of secretive format, where does it stop?
Daniel Hatcher is with the University of Baltimore School of Law.
I think the biggest risk actually is that information that used to be public, like very easily public, is becoming private.
Here's how it's happening. During a bail review, the judge's name is publicly on display. When that hearing concludes, the judge's name is electronically filed as a code.
You could go in physically, potentially, and go through the effort of trying to get all this information, go and search through court files. But they could always change the codes, right after that. There would be no way to know for sure whether you have the right information if you try to do the math.
Without a list of the judges' names and the codes that coincide with them, there's no way to electronically identify those judges following the new bail reform rules. For individuals like Gloria, that means
I have codes. Where do I start? I don't have a name. Sorry.
it's emotional because after 3 weeks at Central Booking, the charges were dropped.
And that was it, and I could go home.
The University of Baltimore School of Law has filed a lawsuit against the Maryland judiciary. A judge has yet to rule on the matter. In the eyes of this mother of 6, district court judges in Baltimore City enjoy built-in protection that keeps them from being held accountable, regardless of their decisions in court.
You don't even know the judge who's doing it. You can't tell nobody names. I mean, everybody's asked me, my mom, my husband, well, what judge is this? And I'm not saying any, I can't. I don't know his name. His name is not on my paperwork. It's just abbreviations of judge and some other letters. That's all I know. And I don't even know what that means.
You could say the court's code that identifies judges is cloaked in secrecy. As we quickly discovered, that makes holding judges accountable for their actions challenging. It's inside courthouses just like this one. Judges are deciding who should be released pretrial and who should stay in jail. Decisions made by district court judges the courts are making more difficult to uncover. And no one knows that better than this woman.
So the ABLE Foundation has been interested in the issue of bail reform.
Cheryl Goldstein is with a nonprofit that studies systemic barriers often faced by those who live in poverty.
After the new rule was adopted by the Administrative Office of Courts about 2 years ago, the ABLE Foundation was interested in doing some research.
In 2017, a new rule concerning bail took effect in Maryland. The rule aimed to eliminate cash bails and reduce jail populations.
What we're interested in seeing is, are judges following this rule or judges not following this rule?
For Goldstein and her team, getting the names of judges has become a battle.
It was surprising.
Unlike in neighboring states like Virginia, Delaware, and Pennsylvania, Maryland does not publish the names of district court judges online. Instead, a numeric code is assigned.
The vast majority of judges are doing their best to comply with the new rule, but a small number of judges are not. And we're just looking to see who those judges are.
The ABLE Foundation filed a public information request, similar to this one that we filed, requesting a copy of the list of unique identifiers assigned to judges serving in the district court for Baltimore City. In both cases, the courts denied the request, and that's led to a lawsuit being filed.
It's a crucial issue in terms of just openness of government.
If we don't have transparency in the way our courts are functioning, in the way our governments are functioning, we no longer will have a democracy.
Sambo Alam is a student attorney with the University of Baltimore Law School. She and Professor Daniel Hatcher filed the lawsuit on behalf of the ABLE Foundation.
The court records with the judges' names are actually public records, but through the coding process, they code out the names and then turn them into a secret.
We did reach out to the courts for a statement. In an email, we were told the judiciary does not comment on pending cases.
That's concerning. If you have a court or an agency who can turn a public record into a non-public record through that kind of secretive format, where does it stop?
Hatcher says it's especially concerning when you consider the state's entire judicial record system is about to go to an electronic format. As for the ABLE Foundation and its research on bail reform, there's been concern over the new rule that aims to reduce jail populations and eliminate cash bails. Studies show the new rule has actually resulted in more defendants being detained without the option of pretrial release. A judge did recently, in part, deny the court's motion to dismiss the complaint filed by the ABLE Foundation. A decision has yet to be made regarding the need to turn over the requested records. Governor, what do you think needs to happen to turn Baltimore around at this point?
We've really got to do something to keep the repeat violent offenders off the streets, because it's a small number of Baltimore City criminals who are committing the most violent crimes repeatedly.
So is it fair to say that you do believe the courts are playing a role in driving the crime that we're currently seeing in Baltimore?
There's no question about that. So we have two bills that we're trying desperately to get passed in the legislature in the last 12 days. One of them is about judicial transparency. Because we have in the executive branch and in the legislative branch, we really push for more accountability and more transparency. The judicial branch of our government seems to feel as if they shouldn't have any. People have a right, they deserve to know about judges that are continually passing lenient sentences on repeat violent offenders. So we have a bill that would just track the sentences handed down by judges and would compile that information.
And identify the judges.
And
your response to the critic, because I know I've talked with people who say it's a risk constitutionally speaking because of the separation of powers. How do you respond to that argument?
Well, I mean, we still have a separation of powers, but each of the other branches is accountable and responsible and transparent. And we have to have protections in there because, look, we can't reveal all of the information. We don't want to put witnesses, people that are testifying, or victims' families. We don't want to expose all the information. But if you're just giving the decisions, here's a crime, here's the sentence, why shouldn't that information be available?
There's a sense that public pressure could influence judges. Your thoughts on that?
Well, right now they're completely unaccountable and there's no pressure whatsoever. They shouldn't be unduly influenced to make a bad decision because of public pressure. But if you have a long track record of never sentencing people and you come up for a vote, you know, some of them have to run for election every once in a while, people should have a right to know what your record is like.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
I really
you.
appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
City judges protected from public scrutiny. Over the past 10 months, we've exposed the protections afforded to certain judges to avoid being held accountable. We found that to be especially true during sentencing, happening in courtrooms across Baltimore City. It's not easy measuring the performance of circuit court judges in Baltimore City, and it may be by design.
Judges don't want to be called out.
Are you suggesting that some of the judges would crack under criticism?
They generally want to be kind of anonymous, you know, black robes that are up on the bench making decisions where the general public can't really figure out the intricacies of each case and their decision. Because ultimately, somebody's not going to be happy.
In 2016, attorney Todd Oppenheim ran unsuccessfully for a judgeship in Baltimore City.
They are elected officials, but they don't necessarily consider themselves public officials.
But they are, in a city that's staring down a fifth straight year of more than 300 murders. Maryland's governor has accused judges of contributing to Baltimore's violent crime by not holding repeat violent offenders accountable.
If you have a long track record of never sentencing people and you come up for a vote, you know, some of them have to run for election every once in a while, people should have a right to know what your record is like.
We reviewed almost 10,000 circuit court cases and the sentencing guideline worksheets judges are expected to fill out, but it's not required. Retired Judge Stephen Platt was around when the worksheets were first rolled out.
As long as they were voluntary, we didn't care. My attitude was, that's nice to know. I'm going to do what I think I ought to do in this case.
Based on the worksheets that were filled out, here's what our spreadsheet of the sentences shows happened in Baltimore City. From the start of 2014 to the end of 2017, we found 77% of the defendants had a criminal past. 51% of those had a major criminal past.
It's one of the more difficult decisions that a judge ever makes is sentencing, because you don't know a lot, and the risk is to the community and to the individual defendant and to his or her family.
A difficult and risky decision that elected judges are allowed to make with little to no transparency, giving voters no real ability to judge for themselves whether a judge measures up.